All right, I hope you can all see a PowerPoint screen. So a little bit about what we're going to cover today. I'm going to introduce our webinar panel to you, and then we're going to offer a high-level introduction to the MTSRN, give you an overview of the website and web resources that are available to help you as you're learning more about the MTSRN. And then I'm going to turn things over to our friends at Frontier Precision. They're going to provide videos in more in-depth detail about actually using the system as GIS and UAS practitioners, including how to log into the system, if necessary, how to understand mount points, any kind of troubleshooting that needs to be done. We'll have information on how to subscribe to the network. And then, as I said, have time for some Q&A as well. Like I said, my name is Jennie Stapp. I'm the Montana State Librarian. I am a Montana native, and I've been working for the State Library since 2005, and in my role as State Librarian since 2012. I've been active in the Montana Geospatial Information Advisory Council since about 2009 or 10, and I've been chair of that council since I became state librarian in 2012. So I work closely with many in the GIS community, including our GIS staff here at the State Library, Erin Fashaway, our GIS coordinator, and other GIS analysts, as well as council members and other practitioners from around the state. So I'm happy to have a chance to be with you today. Kazi Arifuzzaman, our MTSRN operator, is also joining us. Kazi has a PhD in geodesy from the University of Connecticut, and I would venture to guess that we're one of the few networks in the country that actually has a PhD geodesist available to support all of you as the operator of the network. He came to us from Idaho, where he worked to support their network, and we were really grateful to have an opportunity to hire him a couple of years ago. And then we're also joined by our friends at Frontier Precision, Mel Philbrook and Kyle Engel, who have, between them, decades of experience working to help provide practitioners with geospatial solutions to help them improve their workflows. And they're going to provide the real meat of today's webinar, and we're really grateful to have both of them with us today. So a little bit about the state network. It is a state-owned real-time network solution operated on the Trimble Pivot software. The Montana State Library is a state agency. We are an agency within the executive branch of state government. And so this is a state-owned solution. We'll talk at the end about the subscription costs, and I wanted to make you aware that as a state agency, we're not trying to turn a profit. We're just intending to cover the cost of the operations of the network so that we can make it available to all of you statewide. The network backbone is a statewide set of continually operating reference stations that consist of a permanently located global navigating satellite system stations that generate real-time, highly accurate positions. And we operate this network in partnership with a wide variety of contributors. It was really started in partnership with many of the tribes, as well as the Montana Department of Transportation. And then we partner with educational institutions, counties, and private entities. Our contributors help to directly support a lot of the stations. We work with resellers and other vendors who help promote the network to their customers. So there's a variety of ways that different kinds of partners can help become contributors as we grow this network to support Montanans around the state. So why the Montana State Library? We often get questions about why the Montana State Library as a library might operate this kind of network. And first and foremost, we're a 21st century library where we provide very non-traditional kinds of library services, including a lot of the great geospatial information that many of you have come to expect from the State Library. We wanted this to be a state-owned network, and as a neutral, non-regulatory agency, we felt that that was the appropriate home for the network as we work to provide high quality information resources. As you know, the State Library is responsible for providing statewide GIS coordination and access to the Montana spatial data infrastructure and other geospatial data sets. We're really interested in the work of the network because we know it can help us to enhance the geospatial accuracy of many of those GIS data sets. And we have a long, strong commitment to supporting our partners and our end users. And that's really one of the reasons why MDT and the tribes sought us out as a partner to help support the overall network. We have a couple of different web interfaces that I'll walk you through today that are available to provide information for you as you're learning about how to navigate the network. The first is the State Library website, msl.mt.gov/MTSRN. That's really focused on promoting the website and some administrative information to help you learn to navigate the website. And then the MTSRN.org site is on that Trimble Pivot platform where it offers a lot more technical resources for you. Also available through the msl.mt.gov MTSRN site is an email subscription service. You can sign up for updates about expansions and new technologies and services available through the network. So we encourage you to subscribe to our newsletter. Here is that msl.mt.gov/SRN site. A few things I wanted to bring to your attention are the FAQs, the sensor map. There's actually two maps now linked from this page. One is a link to our live sensor map, and we also have a version of a PDF map that you can take with you that I'll show in just a moment. Other kinds of information, including how to subscribe if you're ready to subscribe to the network, and then down at the bottom where you can subscribe to those email updates to have the most up-to-date information about the network. And then this screen shows our mtsrn.org site and a lot of the different information resources that are available to you through this site. I know Mel and others are going to talk more about the information that's in that an FAQ document that's available to you. That FAQ is available from this site. We really encourage you to make use of that as a useful tool for you. There's a scatter plot map to give you a sense of the accuracy of the different stations. We do offer post-processing of the data through the MTSRN. We're not going to talk about that necessarily today, but do know that that service is available and Kazi is available to provide you more information about that service offline. We have that sensor map that shows the live status of all of the stations around the state that's available to you, both from the mtsrn.org site as well as our State of Montana site, msl.mt.gov/MTSRN. And then there is space weather information that is available. So if you're planning some jobs and you're concerned about how weather and solar flares and other kinds of weather-related circumstances might impact your work, you can look for that information available through this site as well. Just a note about logging in. When you go to subscribe, one of the questions that you can see asked is about an organization. We are using that information to track whether or not you are a trial user, and I'll talk about trial use in just a minute. So if you subscribe and want to subscribe as a trial user, we ask you to enter that information into the organization field. If you're not a trial user, if you're just a regular user, you can leave that information blank. We don't need you to enter any information into that organization field. So here's that PDF map. This is a really useful tool for you to have with you. We actually encourage you to print out copies and make them available with your resources so that you have them available offline as you're planning your jobs. Important things to note on this map, and I think Mel might go into this in a little bit more detail, are how we have the state broken out into different subnets. You can see the NWNT, NCNT, NEMT, SWMT, and SCMT. Those are sub-regions. And then as you can see in the legend, we also identify the various virtual reference solutions that are available to you as well. So that information is helpful when you're planning your jobs. The legend also identifies the various constellations that are available to you through the different stations, and we're working really hard to have full constellations available for all of the stations. And then finally, the red triangles there show where we're planning to expand the network through 2025. So our goal is to have stations where you see those red triangles by the end of 2025. You can see that some of the most significant build out is out there in southeastern Montana. We have one station up in Miles City with support of Custer County. And so we're working on building out in that particular area, as well as several other areas of the state. This map is updated frequently as we bring some of these stations online. So we will use our GovDelivery email system to send out updates when this map is updated. And you can also refer to our websites to have the most up-to-date version available as well. I am going to stop my sharing at this point and turn things over to Mel.
Hey, Kyle, I'll let you go ahead and start off here, okay?
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Jenny. Thank you, everyone, for attending. My name is Kyle Engel. I'm with Frontier Precision here in Montana. And Mel came over a few weeks ago from the Idaho area, and we put together some video content just going over how to connect to MTSRN through various field softwares. We put together some information just on troubleshooting. And then we're going to open up and in between videos to any type of discussion. Certainly feel free to put any questions in the chat. I noticed that a few of you did go ahead and respond to the pre-webinar survey that was put out, put some questions in there. So I think a lot of those will get answered through the videos that Mel will be going over. And then lastly, Jenny had just showed it, but some questions, a lot of questions actually are answered in that MTSRN FAQ. It's a PDF. I certainly recommend going to the MTSRN Montana State Library page and downloading that and putting it with your equipment so that you have it out in the field. Other than that, Mel, if you want to go ahead and take it over.
Thanks, Kyle. I believe that's probably the best place to start today, as for all the GIS and unmanned operators trying to use the MTSRN. So you can see that I'm on the landing page for the Montana State Library, which is on this page here, there's a couple quick useful resources that I'm going to be using, and I would encourage you to take a look at. So right here, existing subscribers would log in. You can subscribe there. Post-processing, and we'll talk a little bit about that for the both mapping and unmanned operators, how the MTSRN works, some technical details. But there's right here, there's two frequently asked questions pages, and they, based on the morning session, they maybe will be consolidated. But right now, I wanted to make sure you see both of them. There's one right here. So if I right click and hit open in a new tab, this is more generic or pretty vanilla. You can see it's not very long at all. All right. If I close that one down and go back and go to this live sensor status map, that's the fastest way to get to another page as an operator or a person that's going to be using this interface. And that opened up this what we call pivot-based sensor map and login information. And inside here, you can see there's a link for FAQ there. And this is the robust 27-page FAQ that's that Kyle and everybody's mentioned that we would encourage anybody using this reference network should take a look at, and I'll open that in a new tab here. And you can see it's, like I said, 27 pages long, and I'll get back to this document in just a minute. So back to the sensor map, we'll be focused for our demonstration, because all the videos were pre-recorded, down here in the Bozeman area. And if I roll into this sensor map, you can see that the sensor is green. That means that station is up and running and good. In that FAQ, it goes in that you might see yellow, and that might be there's comms issues or some intermittent issue. And so I would caution you then to, if you were doing anything single-based, to be aware of that. And if it was red, like you saw, that station health is not up and running, or there's something wrong, and the network operators will be looking at that. So there's also this printable map available here, and it's also available here. And I'm going to actually launch and have that open here to show you some things. And that's the map that was shown to you in the breakdown of the areas, northwest, north central, northeast, southwest, and south central, and then southeast is eventually planned. Those stations that you see in red. The legend tells you whether the stations are multi-constellation, just GPS GLONASS. And again, in the FAQ, it goes into detail. You're extremely blessed in Montana. I've been doing this for 35 years, and this network's fairly new. And so that means the majority of the reference stations are all full constellation. I believe all besides 5 stations are only GPS and GLONASS. So that's remarkable. That makes it very exciting to be a part of that network and use that network. So with that said, today, when I start to show software, again, we're trying to show it in a neutral way, which is beneficial to any GPS manufacturer or device hardware that you're going to be using. It will usually have a piece of software, and that software is going to dictate how you connect your physical device, your GIS device or your drone device to this Montana State reference network. And as I started this morning off with, everybody would first need to understand that device has to have connectivity. So that means if you're using a DJI controller, it would either be hotspotted to a phone or a Verizon MiFi, some network providers, internet MiFi, or an internal SIM from some third party providing you a SIM card. Many questions usually come in and say say, hey, I went to my AT&T store or my Verizon store, especially for GIS people and drone people, using this device, and they say they don't support that device. I would encourage those folks to Google a company called Data Activation Center. And there's, I'm just mentioning this company because they specialize in IoT, which is Internet of Things, which are SIM data cards for many peripheral devices that your normal AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, all the people out there selling cellular, they're not familiar with data. And everything we're doing here today deals with data. So just understand these are professional people, and there's other ones, and you can Google that, but just understand these organizations specialize in the IoT of things, the Internet of Things, and providing data to devices. So with that covered down, just know that we have a device. Yes, we have internet connectivity. So then now, and then we properly subscribe for a trial, then we have to build those connectivities or those credentials into a piece of software. And that's what we're going to do right now, okay? So with that said, I'm going to bring up Google Earth just to kind of show you Montana. And this afternoon session is running differently than this morning because this morning session was built around surveying. And surveyors are looking for that sub-centimeter type of connectivity. And that requires you to understand your survey software and how it's set up. In the mapping world, and so at first we're going to talk about the mapping world, and then we'll get into the drone stuff. You need to understand that the manufacturer that you're using has built a mapping grade receiver that is either going to use code-based corrections or carrier-based corrections from the MTSRN. And that is a little less stringent than using survey software. So what I mean by that, and I'll speak on behalf of a Trimble device, even though that mapping device might be using carrier-based corrections, it is capable of gaining corrections up to 100 kilometers away, even further, actually. I'm just trying to keep it tighter for general purposes of 100 kilometers. I know I've tested it at up to 300 kilometers. And I want to make sure everybody understands what that means. So let's go back to this map, and you can see, like, if I was working in Bozeman, and that's MTSU here, and Missoula is, way over in this area. You can see the spacing of many of these reference stations are shown here. And then we're going to work on getting this to be able to be a KMZ where you'll be able to display it here on this Google Earth map. But what I've done here is I'm in Bozeman here. And if I was to bring up a measure tool and put that measure tool over here so you can see it and change that to kilometers. And I said that I can go 100 kilometers, right, from a single base. That means I could go from here in Bozeman, and you can see that 100 kilometers reaches me all the way almost to Butte, right? And I said that that's being super conservative. And so there, if I went all the way up to Helena, it's only 126 kilometers. So why am I showing you that is that understand that if your software from your manufacturer only allows you to use corrections from a single base solution and not a VRS, you're still covered with this investment at MTSRN. You'll be able to go great distances from even using a mount here at MTSU, which is the one in Bozeman. So I just wanted to make sure everybody understands. I'm using this just purely to show you how far 100 kilometers is. And really, that's super conservative with any mapping grade receiver out there, even a high accuracy GIS receiver from any manufacturer. So now with that said, I'm going to close this down and go into the mount. And on page 5 here, we can build mounts to use a VRS, and it talks about what is a mount on page 5. And it says, what are the mount options for, VRS solutions? And then what are the mount options for single base solutions, okay? So in a VRS solution, and if your software supports that, we would tell you to go ahead and operate using a VRS solution. So for example, all the demonstrations today was videos that Kyle and I made when I was in Montana, based out of Bozeman. And so we were in this region here called SWMT. With the but if we were trying to mount to just MTSU on a single base, the document shows you here that you would then it would be listed right here as MTSU_3, which is an RTCM correction, or MTSU_MSM, which is a multi-constellation full GNSS solution. But that would be directly to that mount. This FTPP is just a four-letter identifier, remember, based on the naming structure on this map, okay? So with that said, I'm going to, if Kyle's, there's no questions, I'm going to minimize my screen here, my browser, and I'm going to start with using a piece of software. So again, no matter if you were using Juniper Systems Geode, they have a piece of software that's called Geode Connect. If you're using a Trimble receiver, we use a piece of software called Trimble Mobile Manager. If you were using some other manufacturer's receiver, there's usually a piece of software that allows you to connect to your receiver and then plug in these credentials that were provided to you. I'm going to go ahead and launch Trimble Mobile Manager here. And this is an iPhone, and I have that application. And I'm going to pause here. So I'm going to pause real quickly because one of the problems we have usually with folks using GIS or high accuracy GIS devices on a network is that they haven't kept their software updated. So always make sure you're running the latest application from whatever manufacturer, and then your firmware is updated, because usually when things are broken, it's not necessarily the network, the MTSRN or some other network. It is your software is not current, okay? So this is the latest version. It was updated that day we were doing this. And it's loading Trimble Mobile Manager. And and then once it's loaded here, I select, I want to connect to a device. And in this case, we were using a Trimble DA2, but this could be, an R580, an R980, an R12i, an R2. And I'm going to connect to that antenna, all right? Now we use Trimble Mobile Manager or some third-party software to build the credentials to have the receiver talk to the MTSRN. So under configuration down here, you can see that I'm autonomous by the accuracy of 5 foot, by the way. I'm going to slow down here. You notice that TMM was designed automatically to just do auto, GNSS correction source, and auto output. Especially with the Trimble Catalyst DA2, it's designed to go and do Trimble Corrections Hub, which is not the MTSRN. So I actually want to say I want to build a custom configuration or GNSS correction source. Your third-party manufacturer or some other receiver might be providing some other type of real-time corrections by default too, and you'll need to say, I don't want those, I want to go to this custom source, all right? And so that's what we're going to do right now. So under auto down below here, you see I chose it to say custom. And when I choose custom, then I'm able to plug in my in-trip settings, okay? Now I'm showing right there that most third-party manufacturers will allow you to do in-trip corrections or direct, which is no username and password. And so in our case, everywhere you would operate under MTSRN, is NTRIP. Stands for Network Transmission of RTCM over IP. It's a standard, international standard that all of us are using, all manufacturers. And so and it's username and password. And so you can see here, I'm going to now edit those settings by clicking the edit NTRIP settings, even though these are correct, and make sure that I plug in the right IP, the right port. So again, I'm going to pause and make sure everybody understands that the second issue that most people have is that they typed it in correctly because they didn't double check their work. So I would encourage you that you always double or triple check that you have typed in the server settings. The port will always be 2101. And then you have to know the mount point. So I'm going to slow down here. Remember, and say, hey, I don't know that mount point. Different softwares might allow you to see all the mounts, and some softwares won't show you any mount, and so you would have to then know how to key in that mount. And it is case sensitive. So again, if I minimize this, and I went back to that FAQ, sorry, the FAQ. The mount names are listed here, see? For the VRS or single base. And so that's one way you could do this by looking at it. And then later at the end, I'm going to show you another way you can get mounts, a mount list using a third-party software, okay? So I'm going to go back to my movie here. And remember, we're in Bozeman. And so that was here. And so that's why you see SWMT. So that's why I chose SWMT, VRS, and then CMRX. So in my example, we are going to choose a VRS solution, but you can see our software showed all the single base mounts also. And so you could have gone through the list following the FAQ and manually choose a single base solution if your software doesn't support a VRS solution, okay? And that's how I derived that. Then you would have to plug in your login credentials, and that's the username and password. And again, many times people get too fast with typos. Now here, not all manufacturers or all software supports that what we call a live datum transformation with a mapping solution. On the GNSS source reference frame, it's saying what is the reference frame of the correction source. And this is going to be extremely important as you GIS users and drone operators move into the next SPC change of 2022 where there's a different coordinate system. Today, this coordinate system is on NAT83 2011 EPIC 2010.00. But in the future, when everything does change and migrate, you might have to say that, well, the GNSS source reference frame is now on NAT83 2022, and then that way it'll properly do the datum transformation. But right now, for Montana, it is operating on NAT83 2011 EPIC 2010. And that's why I had to choose that correctly. It's not on NAT83 CORS 96 or some other previous NAT83, okay? So then, in this particular software, I could apply a geoid model, which helps my GIS software, like Esri Field Maps, have better vertical. And that's why you notice there was a geoid model being selected right there. Okay. After choosing the GNSS source, I was able to make sure I chose the right geoid model. So now, once that's all set, I'll reconnect to that receiver, and this piece of software or any third-party software will tell you how accurate you are. So see, I'm going to choose that receiver and reconnect to it. It failed here, but we reconnected, and then it will work here. All right. And like any software, sometimes you just got to close out the software, reboot the receiver, reconnect, and then everything will wake up properly. And that's what will happen. I had nothing shameful to hide here. I just wanted to show you real world, right? And so once we rebooted the receiver and closed the app, relaunched the app, it was able to see the Bluetooth receiver. And that's just something common on lots of different receivers. It's like losing your headset on sometimes you just got to retell it it's there. So I'll move along here, and you can see it's loading. You can see I'm going to connect to that receiver, and now it connects. And then now watch your horizontal and vertical accuracy. As it gains more than 4 satellites, real-time corrections will start to come in. And then I'll show you that you can drop down to the sky plot to see what's going on. And then you can also go down to status to see what's going on there in more detail, okay? So 3 satellites, and like I mentioned, 4 real-time corrections start coming in. So now I have 6 satellites. I have enough satellites to start getting and tracking. And you can see we're autonomous here because it's 6-foot accuracy. And it even says positional status autonomous. Then you can see data coming in by bytes, and that matters. And so that on most manufacturers will show you all this information. And now as bytes start coming in, and I'm tracking 21 satellites, you'll see the accuracy getting better. And it might have picked up SBAS first, and then all of a sudden it'll get even more accurate. And now it says RTK because this is a DA2 Catalyst 1 subscription capable of doing carrier. And now I'm humming at, what I would be expecting from a Catalyst 1 subscription. It shows that I'm doing RTK. I've got 3 seconds latency, and I'm getting information in. And there's my full satellite constellation. So again, whatever manufacturer you're using, there's a piece of software that will probably say, yes, this is how we connect and set up credentials to get into MTSRN. Now, why a Trimble user would always want to use Trimble Mobile Manager is because that allows you to know, like, 1, your credentials are correct. You were able to see your receiver go from autonomous to RTK or decimeter or 30 centimeters or 60 centimeters, whatever your specific receiver is capable of doing. But now, how do I then get Esri field maps or Trimble Terraflex or some application to utilize that? That's what we're going to change gears to. So since many users, are, at least we see, like using Esri field maps, or we went ahead and we'll show you how that's handled here. So in our world, we use Trimble Mobile Manager to get things set up. And then you probably were told to go ahead and close or crash your app so it will not conflict with Esri field maps. And as of present day today, that is how it will operate. However, we were just at Trimble Dimensions, and we had a private dealer, Trimble dealer meeting with the good team at Esri, and understand this, that in a future release of Trimble, of Esri field maps, the way the calls will be made to the receivers, you would run TMM and there'll be a notice put out to folks. You would leave it running and it will not conflict. And it'll just be easier for everybody that way. However, today, understand if you notice, people have called in and said, hey, I did everything you said in Trimble Moment Manager, but I launched Field Maps, it's not working, or I launched some other application. That's because TMM is conflicting with the other receiver talking. And so in this case, though, we're still the way things are currently today. So not to confuse anybody, I closed out of TMM, so you understand that. And now I'm launching Field Maps. So inside Field Maps, we are going to go up to the upper left and hit Maps, and then go hit the icon for the person. And that's how you get into settings. There used to be a round cog under like collector, but that's gone. And you notice here, I have, I want to slow down here. Many people are switching between using an integrated receiver, maybe, and a high-end receiver. And if you're probably using the MTSRN, you're using a higher end receiver to get higher accuracy. That's why you're investing into this solution. And with that, you forgot to switch from integrated to the DA2, and that's why you're not getting high accuracy. So I'm only showing, make sure there's a checkbox on the high-end receiver that you're supposed to be using, because if there was a checkbox on integrated, that's why you're not getting high accuracy. So I'll keep on playing along here. Hit back. And then the other thing that's important is the profile. So profiles matter because the profile is saying, I'm going to use this high-end receiver, and I'm going to go from this real-time source, which is a X datum, which is NAT83 2011 EPIC 2010 here, or some ITRF, and move it to some datum. And that's all handled in using a profile here, okay? And so, again, this is not necessarily training, but we do want to show you, I built a profile here that says I'm going from NAT83 2011. My map is in Web Mercator, and that's how most GIS professionals would train you on how to set up your AGOL, your stuff in Web Mercator auxiliary sphere to display it back into Field Maps and use a datum transformation here. We're not here to train, but can you do it other ways? Yes, but even Jeff Shaner, who's the product manager, would tell you this is the easiest way. Set up your web maps in Web Mercator. If you do a WGS84, there'll be two. They're exactly the same if you don't know that. So it doesn't really matter which one. Just remember Web Mercator auxiliary sphere. And then I'm doing an ITRF to NAT83 2011 transformation, because my GIS in this case is on that coordinate system. If it was some other coordinate system, then that's where you would apply the transformation. But again, we're only here to show you connectivity, but these things matter because if they're not set up correctly, your map won't display, or your position won't display correctly. And it has nothing to do with the MTSRN not working properly. So I hit done here. There's some other things in Field Maps you would set up, but again, this is not for training. You can see that I click that icon. It's going to launch behind the scenes TMM, make the calls, and it pulls the information in TMM. That's what's happening really behind the scene. It's just pulling the settings established in TMM and applying them behind the scenes. And so that's why you see this loading. And if you were preloaded, it would probably just flash and already be ready. But see, it's all behind the scenes. You notice my top GPS accuracy is 1.5 feet. It says I'm connected to a DA2 and I'm at differential right now. I'm correction age limits latent. It's not fast enough, but it's getting warmed up. On a hard receiver like an 980, 580, it would be super fast, but the DA2, we kind of call it the squirrels got to get running. And once the squirrels get running, boom. You can see I'm RTK fixed and my latency is now at 2 to 3 seconds. I'm going to pause here for a second and explain like I did this morning. That correction age limit is a major indicator. Do you have good cellular or not too good cellular? So if you ever wonder why your positions are going bonkers, I would encourage you to hit the details, and I bet you your latency, you're drifting, you got disconnected or something, and that would impact, obviously, your horizontal and vertical precision. Keep on rolling here. Just understand you see that information right there on our accuracy, all right? And you can see that we're outside the Bozeman office operating at, a very good accuracy. And depending on your receiver, whether it's a centimeter, decimeter, 30 centimeter, 60 centimeter receiver, that's what's going to be capable. And that's the power of the MTSRN. It's fantastic to be able to have this network providing GIS users high-end, good corrections to allow you to do better accuracy than your phone, which is plus or minus 10 meters. And there's a whole bunch of information about how your perceived accuracy and what your real accuracy using just a phone by itself is. But we're not here to get in the weeds today about that. So that was Trimble Mobile Manager, and that was Esri field maps. Now I'm going to show you another piece of software, which is called Trimble TerraFlex. Now, with TerraFlex, I was trying to do this live, and let me see if I can get back in there. Trimble TerraFlex is run with Trimble Connect on the backside here. And I'm going to try to log in to my Trimble Connect session here. And I'm logged in here, okay? Now, everything that I built for the video I'm about ready to show you here really is ran on the backside. And so again, like I mentioned to you, some manufacturers, your connectivity, setting up your credentials might be actually done on the cloud. It's not even physically done on the device. And that's the case for Trimble TerraFlex. I have a map here that's called MTSRN test that was built for TerraFlex. And inside this map or cloud is where I manage my connections, okay? And so once this comes up, over here, if I hit the menu, there is a setting called positioning. And under positioning, there's where you build real-time sources. So I have one built here, but I'm going to go ahead and manually create one. So you see how that would be done. And so you give it a name. And so I'm going to call this MSRTN _ VRS. So I know that I'm using a VRS correction, not a single base. If you know you were mounting to a single base, then I would recommend something like that. Again, that's all explained in this wonderful FAQ that I would encourage everybody to read in detail. And then here, we're going to use internet. And then I would have to hit the cog and then say, is this a direct connection? So that's just an IP and a port. But in our case, remember, we're following the international standard of NTRIP, which is corrections of RTCM over IP. And so the URL would be that IP that was shown to you at the beginning, 3.23.213.134. The port is 2101. And I could load the in-trip source. And this is what I said. Some manufacturers can load it and some won't. And then that's why you'll have to know how to grab that from looking at the FAQ, right? But we were able to load it. And then in this case, remember, based on my map, I'm working in Southwest MT. So I would want to grab that. So again, I'll have to plug in my username. So it's Frontier P23. And then the password. And again, make sure you are double checking your IP, your port, your credentials, right? And then for those Teraflex users, I would not recommend checking authenticate details entered by the field user, because that will require the field user every single time to have to plug this in, and that could be a typo and prevent them from being successful. And then here, I'm going to go ahead and load that source again and choose that right one, which was north. I mean, south, clear down here, sorry. Southwest, Q, A, B, C, D, U, V, W, right there. Southwest. And then, so that's the right one, Southwest. And then that made me have to type this back in again, sorry. Tier 23. And make sure that's correct. Select the datum, and that is on NAD 83, 2011. Right there, and hit save. And then you could say a fallback source could be space-based augmentation system, which is WAAS in the United States, Wide Area Augmentation System, and give it a description if you wanted to. And then, by the way, you would usually want to make that compatible with all your workspaces. So now it's available to all your previous maps that you had, okay? And so then I hit save, and now I've built these two, okay? So why is that important is because now when I close this up and I launch my Teraflex app, you're going to see that I have these real-time sources available to me. So I hit the menu, and then I go down to settings. And then again here, I'm going to pause. You have to make sure you're not pointing to your internal device. You're pointing to the right receiver, because if that's set internal, your phone is not capable of hitting the MTSRN, but at least today. In the future, sometime in the future, that might change. If you haven't pay attention to the news, Trimble RTX has cut a deal with Qualcomm on the next Snapdragon chip, and you might see RTX enabled on some phones in the future. But as of today, that it has to be an external receiver, and that could be a Trimble receiver again, or some other receiver that you're using. But in this case, this is a Trimble piece of software, making sure I'm using the right receiver that allows for this. And you notice that now I have a Catalyst survey and that real-time configuration available. If that said internal, I would lose all of that. I would not see any of those settings available, okay? So it does say the right thing. And because of that, these two things are available, okay? See, I lost all of those things, see? So hopefully that's helpful. And now by choosing the receiver that supports real-time corrections, now I get to choose a real-time source, and that's why I made it available to all my maps. And then I'm going to choose that real-time source. And again, remember for DA2s, when you pay for a DA2, you do have access to Trimble Corrections Hub, but you'll get way better corrections working locally inside Montana with Montana VRS. And we've done plenty of testing on that. And now I'm going to choose the MTSRN. And that allows me then now to not use Trimble Corrections Hub, but use the MTSRN, which is actually pulling from the right VRS, right? And then, and then honestly, I would probably have named that in the real world as MTSRN underscore Southwest or Northwest or North Central in my pull downs. That way I know I'm using the correct VRS. Now, if I hit the menu and go to location status, it won't lie. It says I'm connected, and I'm already, by the time I did all of that video, it was already humming at real-time corrections. And that's because Kyle and I built this first with TMM and field maps. That receiver was already outside and hot. It had not lost initialization. And so therefore, by the time I switched into Teraflex, it was already humming. Sometimes you might see it just like field maps be coming down, coming down, coming down. And then again, up here in the upper right, it doesn't lie. It shows you the position, and you're actually able to hit that icon up there in the upper left, and it would take you into that location status information, okay? Or you can go home and again, hit the menu and go back to location status to see your latency. See 2 seconds latency clear down to the bottom. I'll slow down right here. And it was 14, 15 seconds connection, all of that. Super important information. And you can see we're operating at 0.4 inches outside the Bozeman office. So with that said, Kyle, any questions before we kind of transition over to the drone side?
Yeah, Mel, wanted to comment in the Q&A there. Earlier when just talking about using Mobile Manager, you compared MTSRN to the Catalyst subscription, and just talking on the accuracy between the two. Can you go a little bit more into comparing on that?
Yeah, I mean, so and I think people are visual, so I want to bring back up this map. Let's talk about that. That was a very good question, whoever asked that. So I'm going to role play here and to answer that question. I have a Trimble DA2, and I happen to be working over here in this section. Can you see my mouse, Kyle, when I'm doing this?
Yes.
Yep. So I'm working in the southeast Montana section, which is not quite built out yet. Those red icons are not up and running yet. And yet I have this investment in this receiver. Well, then by leaving it set to Trimble Corrections Hub, and you own a DA2, or you own like an R980 or R580 that has what they call the 100% attachment plan, which gives you Trimble RTX for free for 1 year, or when you pay for a DA2 and a subscription, you also have that. That means that if I switch to Trimble Correction Hubs, I will actually get the accuracy via cellular or satellite-based corrections in that zone, okay? Which is awesome then for you, because there is no real-time network available in that section. And then you could say to me, well, hey, Mel, you said you could go 100 kilometers from a base. And let's just role play here, MTMC, and help me out, Kyle. That's probably what, Billings? No? MTSC?
Miles City.
MTSC is
I believe that's
Miles City. I'm sorry. Okay. So I'm going to come over here in my Google Earth map and type in Miles City, Montana, and search. And there you go, okay? So that's Miles City. Now, remember I said 100-kilometer rule. So if I pick there, 100 kilometers almost gets you, down here. So if you were down here in the border, you're pushing that 100-kilometer rule, right? So that's where that Trimble Corrections Hub would play value, because now if you had no cellular, you could operate, or if you had, because you're going to get space-based corrections. Now, let's just talk about for those folks operating back in even the Bozeman area, okay? So if you're operating in Bozeman and you know that you're within 2 VRS frames, the VRS is doing ionospheric and tropospheric modeling. And plus it's a local virtual reference station. There's no PPM. So if you're doing high accuracy GIS with any manufacturer's receiver out there getting, then you are going to get a better answer using VRS from the Montana State reference than you would using Trimble Corrections Hub. I mentioned that I'm doing this demo, for example, in Seattle, and I could go outside my office here, and even though Gavin Schrock's WSRN is right here, and it's extremely a good network, that region is called PSRN. If I come outside my office and I use a DA2 and use Trimble Corrections Hub, my accuracies will probably be at a Catalyst 1 subscription, maybe 1/10 to 2/10. And if I use the WSRN and choose the PSRN, I'll get that more near centimeter to sub 2 centimeter accuracy. So hopefully that answers that question, that a VRS or a single base, even right there, if you were only operating in Bozeman, you're dealing with a reliable reference station, right? A reliable reference station right here in Bozeman, of a Trimble alloy, full constellation, and you can't beat that being local right here in Bozeman, using MTSU single base or VRS to get your corrections versus Trimble Corrections Hub. Not that there's anything wrong with Corrections Hub, it's just not local, and therefore it's not as good.
And just a real quick correction on Mel's description there. He said WSRN a few times, definitely talking about MTSRN.
So let's transition to the drone guys, okay? So again, why this map is important for drone operators is that your software either can support, well, let me slow down here. I've been doing this long enough. My background is I've been involved with the unmanned team since, I've been doing unmanned since 2015, and geospatial. The unmanned aircraft out there is not going to be able to use CMRX corrections, all right? So back to the FIQ, they'll be using RTCM 3.1, 3.2, or 3MSM, something that's RTCM based, okay? So if you know that, and looking at your map, and again, we're role playing out of Bozeman, I'm going to use MTSU, and I would want to, because I'm operating in Bozeman. Now, let's just say again, if you were operating out here, it would be a different story, because now there's nothing out here yet, and you would have to try to get a real-time corrections from the last working station outside the net. Not ideal. And so what we're about ready to show you is typically used in these quadrants up here: northeast, north central, northwest, southwest, and south central today, okay? So with that said, and following the protocols here of either FTP_3, or if I zoomed up here so people are seeing that, or FTP multi-station, which is 3.4, though that the mount would have been MTSU_3 or MTSU_MSM. And it is case sensitive. Or I'm going to use a multi-station mount, and that's what we did for a DJI drone. You would have to test these with your drone to understand if it's working. So just understand what we're trying to say to you. I'm using a DJI platform, and so whether it was an M350 RTK or M3E RTK, you could do what I am going to do in this video now. If you're using some other aircraft, we would encourage you to talk to whoever you bought your drone from, and they should be able to help you. We can definitely help you. Anything purchased from FPI Unmanned through Kyle and myself. So with that said, I'm going to launch a DJI platform here. So in this case, I was using DJI Pilot 2 for a Mavic 3 Enterprise, but understand this same interface would be required for an M3, any R2K drone from DJI to provide real-time corrections to a drone. Now, we would tell you that does not mean that you don't need any GCPs on the ground. It is only allowing you to maybe minimize the amount of GCPs and also fly with higher degree of precision, which is great when flying with LiDAR, especially, so you can keep your 3D position more accurate. And so if you're flying, for example, at 70 meters for LiDAR, it would stay consistent at 70 meters because it's following a digital elevation model versus not flying real time, and it's plus or minus 10 meters plus flying 70 meters, okay? This drone has to be connected to the internet, and it was connected up here. You can see in the very top using Wi-Fi from a hotspot. However, like I mentioned, Data Activation Center can provide you a SIM card for your DJI remote. I'm going to keep on playing here, and you're going to hit enter camera view typically. There's lots of ways to get to the settings. I'm just showing you the easiest way was just to go hit enter camera view instead of trying to launch a mission to get to the pre-flight check, to close that out, to get into the settings. So close that out. And now I'm going to hit the ... up top to be able to get into some settings. And I'm going to roll all the way down where it shows the satellite. And that's where you set all the real-time settings up for a DJI drone. Now, whatever manufacturer you're using would have some interface where you can plug in these similar credentials, right? I'm only showing you one particular manufacturer. So way up top, the first thing you're going to do is going to have to turn on RTK positioning. So as soon as I run that slider, both of them get turned on. And then that would have been set by default to no network or none. And then we're not using a DRTK, we're using a custom network. So you're going to choose custom. And then you would have 5 configurations available to you, okay? Now, you can see, I'm going to pause here. I've already got one to go to an R980 using a built-in SIM automatically. I've got one set up to do an R980 using Wi-Fi. But now I'm going to show you how to use the MSRTN, which is very awesome. So now my controller doesn't have to be close to my base, and I can fly with my drone, keep line of sight with my drone because I know I have cellular. Now, again, I'm bringing that up because there is no magic. You have to have cellular. So you can't fly this drone with the MTSRN in a non-cellular environment and expect to get any corrections. So with that said, I'm going to modify one of these configurations. I believe it was configuration number 1 or 5. And when you pick it, you have to roll down to the bottom, and then you'll have to hit edit. And when I hit edit, then you got to kind of roll back up and give it a name. And I would encourage you to give it a name that's intelligent, MTSRN per the region, or MTSRN single base, whatever you got to do. And that way, when you're moving around the state, you might have to make some slight changes to the mount point, right? Because that's important. So in this case, we just called it MTSRN. The end-trip address would be that 213.134. And again, here's where we have people make mistakes. They had a typo and they don't catch it, and that's why it's not working. 3.23.213.134, and I triple checked it. The port is 2101, and the account is that username, okay? And so again, a typo here and nothing works. And depending on your software manufacturer, but DJI will tell you a good job. You will not be able to save this, folks, if you have a typo. It won't save, okay? So if your credentials aren't right, it won't allow you to save it. And that tells you that either your IP's wrong, your port's wrong, your account's wrong, your password's wrong, or your mount name's wrong. So here I typed in the password and I made a typo, so I had to go back, make sure I see it. The mount point matters. It's case sensitive. And so in this case, you'll see that I'm going to use an MTSS underscore RTCM. I would recommend doing this for drone operators because that'll find the closest single base and it works with this software, so your miles will use it. So that is like a trick right there. That MTSS is a single base dynamic. So as you move with your drone, it's going to find the closest single base for you. So why not use that for you? Now, could I mount directly to MTSU_3? Sure, you could. And but I'm recommending with DJI platforms this method. So here you can see I'm double checking my username in the mount, and then I hit save. As soon as I hit save, you'll notice it says not connected. And now watch that not connected say it's converging. If you roll up here, you notice the icon's red up there, meaning it's not hot yet, not getting real-time corrections. That will be white. It used to be green. I wish they would be green and red like it used to be. It just goes from red to white, which is not intuitive. Green was right in your face. So I'm going to hit the dot, dot, dot. I would recommend you do that because that way you can drop back down and see when this says converging and connected. Now I'm going to pause here just for a second. When folks make these changes, and you can see it turn connected already, sometimes you actually have to shut the DJI bird down and your controller and reconnect. I just know that. I did not have to here. We were hot video recording this, but just know that I have seen that I plugged this in and all you needed to do is reboot the bird and reboot the controller. And then again, make sure the controller's got internet, and then everything went hot. So understand that doesn't happen when it's been working, only when you freshly keyed it in. But you can see it says connected here. And I keep on playing here. And now you notice it's white, 23 satellites. And there would have been an audible that says, RTK enable, and you're ready to fly. It was a beautiful Montana day, snowing, and because winter was coming, and that's how easy it is to get a drone running with the value of the Montana State network. Now, one last thing I wanted to talk about for the drone operators, and we're not here to get in the weeds today, but I have to bring up another great value, and that's right here on this sensor map, okay? Now, I'm just gonna bring it up, and I would encourage if you're a drone operator that's got a high-end LiDAR system that and you were logging base data at 1 second epic, and I'm just role playing in here, and you were operating right here in Bozeman, you know, or you were out here by the Bridgers, you know, or out here on the, you know, the outskirts of town. And for some reason, while you were flying your drone, your base battery died. And you thought, oh man, I needed that data. Another reason why you would want to invest into the MTSRN is they have this, when I'm logged in here, it's called Ref Data Shop. And this is also applicable to GIS users that have post-processing software. And let's just say you thought there was a base running for you and it wasn't running, and now you don't have base data. You can actually click Ref Data Shop when you have subscribed, and you can start a new order. Now, mind you, and I'm going to say this twice, that way it was in the recording twice. If you read the FAQ, that data, because it's high intensity data, is only going to be available for 48 hours after you operate, not forever. So understand that. So I'm going to say it one more time for the recording. That data from Ref Data Shop is only available for you for 2 days. And so I'm saying to you, if you're going to be doing this, you get it by the next day, not 2 days, okay? Because this is a courtesy service, and it's not longer than that time frame, and it's stated in the FAQ, okay? Now, why does that have value? Because the Montana State Library and the MTSRN can just save you now by hitting start a new order. I can grab reference data from any one of those stations, so any of these stations, they're by name. But let's just say I was operating in here, you know, or here, and it is, you want that baseline to be as short as possible. You could just go to Google Earth and figure out where that's at, or use your receiver, plug in that lat long into that interface right here. Sorry, let me get back to it. Virtual reference station. And now if I plug in my lat long at that position, it will virtualize a base there and generate static data at for you to operate. So I'll just, you can even pick on the map. So I'm just doing this fast. I'm just going to pick like right there, okay? So I thought it allows you to pick from a map. I'll just
you can drag the pointer, the red pointer.
Yes, thanks, Kazi. Right here. Oh, yes, thank you. So I'm going to put it, I'll put it like over here, see? And it's shoved in the values, right? And so then you just hit next and plug in your time frame that you want it, and that you would want 1 second data. We don't need a, you know, this is not a training session, but add to your order. And that is phenomenal value to mapping people post-processing and drone operators who had a base, or if you don't own a base, now you have a base. And so I don't want to get too far in the weeds. We'd love to pull that offline, but that kind of wraps up mapping folks and drone folks, and the use of this very beautiful network provided to you by the Montana State Library, the Montana State, and the MTSRN.
That's great. Mel, Kyle, thank you so much. We have some time for some questions. If anybody has any questions, feel free to use the Q&A or the chat.
I don't see anything that I missed in the chat. And then I think Mel mentioned that the accuracy in the mobile manager data is comparable. Yep. So I think we answered Caitlin's question.
Yep.
And I'll just only state this because we stated it in the morning, and more high accuracy GIS users are using high-end equipment. So it's kind of like survey equipment. And since I didn't say this, I do need to because this is being recorded. We would always encourage you to tie in and check into NGS monuments, even as GIS operators. And I know there's a great GIS guru up in Alaska named Joel Cusack, and he would be disappointed if I said to you, know your coordinate system and know your control and know your datum. And that's what you work with reliable distribution partners. Just understand, like the FAQ states, the Montana network is just providing you lat long and a height above ellipsoid. It's not in any particular datum, and it's not, it's just sending you corrections per se. It's up to you to, as an end user, to know your receiver and know your software, so that way you can be in the right coordinate system, be on grid or be on ground, and be on NAT 83 2011, NAT 83 Cores 96, or whatever UTM, whatever coordinate system you want to be on. So just wanted to make sure I say that for everybody, because there is no magic button. These corrections are phenomenal, and they're doing unbelievable things to our receivers, Leica receivers, TopCon receivers, agricultural receivers, drone receivers. But you're only as good as your knowledge of that particular receiver.
Feel free to continue to ask any questions that you might have. As we're wrapping up, I just wanted to let you know a little bit more about next steps if you're interested in taking advantage of the MTSRN. We do offer subscriptions through the state library, and typically when people subscribe and they're new and they want to learn a little bit more about the network, we offer a 30-day trial period. As we're coming into the holidays and a little bit of winter season, we wanted to extend that trial period to all of you through January 31st of 2025. So if in the next couple of days or a few weeks you decide you want to test the system, again, you can go to the msl.mt.gov/MTSRN site and select the subscribe here button, and it will walk you through the steps of subscribing. And Kazi will be in touch with you about how to create that login information and to start your trial period. And then as long as you pay before the end of January 31st, you'll have that subscription continue beyond that trial period. The subscription cost is $1,500 per login per year. And that's a year based on when you subscribe. We don't police the use of those logins. So if you have more than one user in your company that's sharing a login, that is fine. You cannot use a login concurrently. That's the one restriction that you would find. And so if you find that you need multiple logins to meet your business needs, it is $1,500 per login. You'll receive some follow-up information from us about the trial period and how to subscribe. So look for that information in your email. We hope you'll take advantage of that trial offer through January 31st of 2025. I just wanted to make sure all of you have Kazi's contact information here. He's going to be your best resource for finding out more information about how to become a user of the MTSRN.
So there was a question about the workflow on the drones, and is that supported for any drone? I wanted to make sure to clarify. there are drones in the world that support real-time corrections for only precision flying, which is awesome. Because there's case points for that, especially like drones that are doing video inspections on or around maybe sensitive devices, and they have to precision fly. And there's drones that actually do both. They use the real-time corrections for precision flight, and they also use that those epic by epic corrections to modify the subpar GNSS antenna that's autonomous with real-time high accuracy or higher accuracy corrections, which allows then your photogrammetric images to be geotagged or with a higher positional accuracy. So in this particular question was asking for like an old Phantom. If you have a DJI Phantom 4 Pro only, then it's not applicable. If you had a Phantom 4 Pro with the RTK that was embedded, and that's kind of the cool thing about the new Mavic 3 Enterprise, you can buy it without and then add it later. And back in the DJI Phantom 4 Pro days, it was one or the other. If you have a Phantom 4 Pro, then it would support RTCM corrections. And then starting with the platform that's relevant today, any DJI bird or aircraft that supports, like a Mavic 3 Enterprise supports what I showed you today. The M350 RTK supports that. There's an M30, these platforms, and then we sell NDA compliant drones, but they only support precision flying per se, not precision metadata into the photogrammetric world. And then there's drones out there that actually would maybe grab that data from the epic by epic and then put it in a CSV and then have it be applied. You would have to know your manufacturer in that particular bird. Hopefully that answers that question though. But the post-processing capability I showed for many birds, many manufacturers, and we cover a lot of them, that's unbelievable power. I can't stress that enough. I would encourage you to take a trial out, and you would realize that that subscription alone could, on one bad base failure, that's, for you to have to go redo your work to be able to virtualize a base, grab static data that saves that product and that mission. I can tell you as drone resellers and supporting people, I cannot tell you how many times people said, my battery died, what do I do? And luckily for me, sometimes there's a VRS network that is doing ref data shop, and like the WSRN or the Montana State VRS, but not all networks do that. And that's an added value to the folks here in Montana, because not everybody does that.
Thanks, Mel. There's a question from Jeff about what happens if you log into the same account as another user. Does it end corrections for that user?
No, it's a terrible. So like when Evan and everybody's mentioning here that we don't monitor, or they're not monitoring that. We don't misinterpret that as we're encouraging you to sign up for one login and try to hit multiple devices, because that will lock your account. And we don't need to get in the weeds here, but that's not pretty. It then stops everybody from working, and then it's not an easy fix. It has to go all the way back into the network operator to try to clean that up. So it is one user and one login, and I guess what I didn't show, maybe we still do show, if you want that. I'll share my screen again. I said that I'd show you a third-party piece of software that looks at mounts. right here, and I'll close everything out so it's not confusing. There is a free client called Librarian Intrip client that runs on my Windows computer. And by plugging in, the right port address and credentials, and then putting my position, and I get that from Google Earth or Google Maps even. You can download. You would come up here and hit connect and download the source table. Now, why am I showing you this? This is freeware that allows you to know your credentials and the network's working. Because if I was to choose, any one of these and connect, if I'm getting data, the network's operating. Okay. So that's awesome. Okay. So just know that. Okay. So if you connect to a network and you start getting real-time feeds, it's working. All right. Now, why am I also showing you this is that if I was to stay logged in here, right, I am using my credentials, right? I cannot try to log in with another device or that will lock the account. So two things, if you are using the Librarian Intrip client, make sure you hit disconnect and then close out of the application. And therefore, that way, when you get out in the field, it's not running and that would prevent you from logging in. The second reason why we showed you that tool, it allows you to self-police your own credentials and that you are operating correctly on this network. And there's nothing wrong with the network. I can tell you, I've been doing this for a long time. Usually, network failure is very slim. It's always either your internet source is not working or your credentials aren't set up properly. So. And then Kyle, do you remember the name of the iOS app? I'm sorry, I forgot that one, but this Librarian works on Android and Windows, and there is one available for iOS.
I
Yeah.
could probably pull it up real quick.
Yeah.
You just gotta type in Intrip, but
Mm-hmm.
yep.
Was there any other questions out there?
Yes, there is one more question. Well, from JC Wallace, what kind of photogrammetric surface elevation accuracy could you reasonably expect using MTSRN?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so let's again, so that's Jesse asked a good question about using a VRS correction with a particular platform that's called a Mavic 3 Enterprise. And so I got to first preface his question. It says, what kind of photogrammetric surface elevation accuracy could you see reasonably expected, let's just say with no GCPs and just using that source? I'm going to say shockingly, you see really good accuracy. However, I'm going to premise that we always say that you need to have GCPs on the ground. Therefore, you can verify and check whether they're manual tie points or something that you can see for checks. And so when I say how good, hopefully you respect this, Jesse, that I would encourage everybody to test it wherever they're operating at. I'll just role play here at a Bozeman and flying an M3E. I know that I've seen, horizontal accuracies better than a tenth, and vertical accuracies better than a couple tenths, and probably way better than that. But I don't want to overhype the value of using it real time and no GCPs. And I've done this also in other areas with the Mavic 3 Enterprise, like in the ORGN, which is in Oregon out of our Bend office, and have data I could show you offline if you wanted to ping Kyle and myself. And I've done it in Washington and other places. But that does not negate us saying that GCPs are highly recommended. And I will say it helps you reduce maybe the amount of GCPs because you'll have better confidence. And not all platforms do that. So I don't want to say that what I just answered for Jesse on a Mavic 3 Enterprise is applicable to any other bird out there. But I would say it's, if you own a Mavic 3 Enterprise, I highly would encourage you to try using the MTSRN, and you'll be shockingly surprised on how well it works. Hopefully that answers your question, Jesse.
Yeah, Christian got it in there too. In-trip checker for iOS.
Appreciate that.
Um,
Yeah, and one last thing, just understand the world's changing quickly, and so more and more devices will have connectivity, and that means GIS devices and drones. So Montana is just a leader, and by having this the state network here, and it's a community service for agriculture, drones, emergency services, search and rescue, on and on and on. So it's phenomenal what it can do, and it's only going to become more powerful.
Mel, although I answered the question, but I would prefer if you answer the questions. The questions from Deb Torrell. Who do we contact if we need assistance in connecting to the service?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I'll speak on behalf of, I've been in distribution for 35 years as a support and trainer. And I've worked in many different states where some networks aren't necessarily Trimble and some are. And I would say it's the fiduciary responsibility of the dealer or the manufacturer you're buying from to be able to support you with your equipment. So but I'm not responsible for every manufacturer out there. And so I would say in our particular case, if you have Trimble equipment in the state of Montana, Kyle, myself, and the entire AGA team, which is our technical support staff, know how and correctly to utilize that equipment. Same thing with the unmanned side, and same thing with the mapping side. If you happen to buy, let's just say, something from another manufacturer and you're not getting supported, I would tell you that Kyle and I would still entertain, a call or a question, and you should ring into you can ring into us. But I will say is not to do. That is not the responsibility of Kazi, Evan, and the entire staff at the Montana State Library, right? That's not their lane. And so and that's I hope I'm not stepping out of line. That's just not that's not their experience. And so don't take it out on them. There's too many devices in the world, right? And each of those manufacturers and those people, those professional people selling those devices should take what do you call it, pride and craft, and know how to support that product. In all the years I've been doing this, since 35 years, that's the way it's run. Whether it's Utah's network, Washington's network, California's network, Oregon's network, which is not even a Trimble network, it's my responsibility to know that network, know how my equipment, because I'm a manufacturer representative. So hopefully that is a good neutral answer. We're more than happy to help. And even if it's not ours, I might, it's a small world, right, Kyle? I might know somebody from that manufacturer and at least point you to somebody that can help you. Okay, hopefully that's the neutral professional answer to that.
Thanks, Mel, and that really illustrates the importance of the contributor agreements that we have in place for the MTSRN. We really are working hard to build those kinds of partnerships that can build out and support a variety of uses of the MTSRN. Appreciate Frontier Precision support. There was a question from Christian about use of Starlink, the satellite internet, instead of cellular communications if it's out of cell signal range.
Yeah, I personally don't have any experience of folks using Starlink. Mel, have you had anyone in remote areas run it?
Yeah, so it's a very good question, and that'll be fluidly changing. As of today, we work up in Alaska, and there's Acorn, which is another network being developed, a lot of remote stations. The stations themselves have been using Starlink. But that's not what Christian's question is more about on the rover end, probably because I know Christian. On the rover end, there's nothing per se being operated as a typical rover person. And what I mean by that, because most roving users are using, a handheld or a rover, even a survey grade stick. And even though Starlink Mobile is capable, right, and it generates a wireless range, it would be more, that would only be used in a mobile scenario, maybe like, and it could be used like we've done positive train control stuff with high rails, and those high rails were mounted with Starlink Mobile, or a vehicle, right, with Starlink Mobile. And therefore it is getting a real-time correction and able to broadcast Wi-Fi to a physical device, allowing you to tie into real-time corrections. But in the sense of really mobile in small size, I think the world is staying tuned for Elon and team to launch Starlink Mobile, and which is a mobile phone, and that is not speculative. It will happen, and then that will revolutionize a way people can work in Alaska and other remote disparate places. But hopefully that's the best answer I can give about that today.
Yep. Lastly, there was a question put in here, just aware of any American-made UAVs that are compatible with MTSRN. If you want to just reach out to me directly on that, we have a whole portfolio of Blue UAVs, Blue UAS, American-made, and we can certainly just chat about sort of what solutions would work best for what you're trying to utilize MTSRN for.
Any other questions? Again, I just really want to thank Mel and Kyle. They've been great partners in helping us to put on these webinar series. I hope these were really, really informative to you. We have been recording and we'll make the recordings available to all of the attendees. And again, I want to reiterate the opportunity to run a trial of the MTSRN, see if it's going to work your needs, for your needs. Kazi and our staff are available to support, and as you've heard, we have great partners with Frontier Precision. So thank you so much for spending almost 2 hours with us today. Really appreciate your time.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thanks.